Hello everyone and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today I'm going to be doing my round 24 tuck shops, going through each team and talking about one takeaway that I have from round 24, as well as a little bit about a preview for their next season, where they can go to. So it's sort of just like where I think each team can learn from, with a learning curve, and also a bit based on how they played in round 24. Before we get into the video, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like and subscribing to my channel, I'd really appreciate it, and it would really help grow my channel. But with that being said, let's get straight into the video.
It came up behind him like a librarian. Jesus!
So we'll start with the Collingwood and Melbourne game on the Friday night, which, if not by halftime, Collingwood were up by 50, was going to be a dead rubber, because they needed a total of 200 points in margin between that game and the St Kilda Carlton game for them to potentially make finals, and it didn't happen. We also got a rain delay, lightning delay, and that was pretty interesting. And it's interesting that Melbourne has had it 3 times the last 3 or 4 years, with the West Coast game, the Brisbane game with the lights, now this one. But my main takeaways is that on the back of Dacos, Collingwood could do a lot, but they still need help. They still need someone to do the in and under role in the midfield, and they still need some help around him. It can't just be on the back of him. While he can have individual seasons where he's brilliant and could very well win the Brownlow this year, they still need a lot of others. And then for Melbourne, I think that they probably need a reset. As I'm recording this, which is on the Wednesday night, they have had Neil Bullen already request a trade, which happened like a week ago. They've had Neil Bullen Pickett potentially request a trade. They've had obviously lots of rumours with Christian Petrarca over the last week and a half, and they've also been the stuff with Harrison Petty. There's been the stuff with Clayton Oliver. There's also Jack Viney. There's been a lot of stuff with rumours where the team has just had a lot of unnerve and a lot of unrest in them over the last 2 weeks. And it seems to have potentially ruptured a bit of that culture and a bit of that chemistry that they like to parade outside of the club. Whether you believe that they've got a great culture or not isn't the point. It's the fact that if they did or not, it's starting to break now. And it seems that if you can capitalise before the Tassie team comes in, then you can capitalise off that with the draft, like what Richmond look to have been doing. If Melbourne choose to go down that path, I think they'll be better off in the future and use some of the key pieces they have now as a bit of a starting off point with a step in front of like a Richmond. But there's going to be some big questions for them certainly in this off-season. The next game was Hawthorn and North Melbourne, and like always in this season, I've praised Hawthorn. I haven't really tipped them in a lot of games, but I don't think they've done a lot wrong. They weren't great in the first 5 weeks, obviously, but a lot of it has been done by commission. Lost Will Day, and we still don't know if he's going to be playing in the final, but still they were able to whack North Melbourne down in Tasmania. Newcombe was fantastic. He had like 35 touches and 4 goal assists, which is a great game. D'Ambrosio is probably going to be an all-Australian winger. If you would have predicted that before the season, no one would have believed you. Don't even think the most crazy Essendon fans or Hawthorn fans who loved him would have predicted that. And so that's fantastic coaching to be able to develop that talent from Sam Mitchell. If you look at players like Weddle and Scrimshaw and Frost, players who have been behind the ball, and there were lots of injuries for Hawthorn at the start of the year in those positions. They filled the roles perfectly. You look up forward, no Mitch Lewis, who was seen as their real bright spot in terms of key forwards. Chol's been fantastic. Gunston's had a really good bounce back here. Cal Shatir's been very bright. There's a lot of key points there for Hawthorn to now build off of and continue this surge. And I think they're primed to honestly win a final, as I just think that the Bulldogs can be so inconsistent, and Hawthorn haven't been that in the second half of the season. Now for North Melbourne, I think that they need to buy. I think they need to look at their defence, and they need to look at a couple of small forwards, because outside of Paul Curtis, I don't think there's anything really scary for opponents, I think is a good way to put it. If you're coming into North Melbourne, obviously you want to stop Nick Larkey, Cam Zerhard you want to put someone onto, and then their smalls, it's Paul Curtis. The rest you don't really care about. Harry Sheasel can play it there at times, but there's nothing else. So looking for someone who's more experienced, they need to look at that rather than just focusing on the draft. They've said that they might trade down their pick to get a couple of others rather than just the one. I don't know if that's the right choice, but it's certainly something you can do to get some value back. And I think that it could work, but they just need more help around their youth, because that's what will drive them. It's their youth. The next game was Geelong versus West Coast, and it's pretty obvious that the talking point here is Jeremy Cameron. Kicked 9 goals, 7 in the first half, and it just shows that he is primed for September. They're playing Port Adelaide in Adelaide, and Learlick's got slightly injured against Fremantle, but I don't think there's too much cause for concern. However, there's been problems with Port Adelaide in the past in terms of stopping key forwards, and if Geelong get enough delivery and get good delivery to him, he can absolutely tear apart a game like he has shown to do before. And so that's a real watch for Port Adelaide. Do they go Zerk Thatcher or do they go Alir? I think that could be a make or break it decision. And then for West Coast, there's nothing really to talk about. You just got to get in as much talent as possible in the off season and tough through probably 1 or 2 more seasons where you're really, really bad. Gold Coast, Richmond was the other game. Obviously, lots of retirees for Richmond, and it's pretty obvious that they're selling everyone. You can also classify it as an introduction to Gold Coast for Daniel Rioli. But with the Richmond retirees, it shows that they're looking to sell. Baker, Bolton, Rioli, as I mentioned before, they're all looking to now request trades away. Bolton officially requested to Fremantle, I believe, and Baker's looking more like West Coast. Graham obviously is looking towards West Coast. They need to keep some players, and I think players like Dan Curvis, Broad, Floston, Short, potentially Keith Lynch, although he has been rumoured to leave. I think if you keep some more experienced players, especially behind the ball, you could be set up to have some really exciting youth, and that can obviously lead to a consistency, but it can also lead to some exciting football at times, and that's what Richmond fans can hope for. For Gold Coast, I think it's just sort of who do you really want to target? You're obviously going to get Leo Lombard in the draft, so with your pick, do you want to trade it out or do you just want to use that for Lombard? Get as much value as possible, because how much do you really want to change to this list? You're going to get Rioli. You've already had John Noble request a trade to you guys. Where do you want to go with the list? Is it really just adding final touches, or do you need something big in order to change how poor they were at times this season? For the Brisbane Lions Essendon game, I believe that the new Brisbane Lions X Factor is going to be Will Ashcroft, not Cam Rayner. Obviously, Rayner probably has a more game-breaking ability, but with Brisbane's performance, I think Ashcroft probably is honestly a bit more consistent, which is a crazy thing to say for a bloke who's technically just finishing his first season, given he tore his ACL, compared to a bloke who I think is in his 6th or 7th season. That's crazy, but I think Ashcroft, he's obviously not have as much responsibility as Rayner, because he's got players like Neil and Dunkley and McCluggage in the midfield in front of him. But I think that he's such a smooth mover. He's so clever with what he does that he's a bit more reliable, honestly, than Cam Rayner is already, which is fantastic, and he'll be a huge piece for their future. For Essendon, where to now? Because it's basically 3 seasons in a row where you have started well. Obviously, a bit of that is with the draw, and obviously has some injuries, but everyone else has them, and then they fade really poorly late. What do you want to do now with your list as well? Because you added some really experienced players, and now that you've had some draft picks that haven't been so successful, Ben Hobbs, Elijah Charters, you haven't even wanted to try, and obviously Zach Reed and Nick Cox is the other one. What do you do with them? Do you want to try capitalize off some trade value, or do you just ride it out? It's a really important question that they need to answer, because otherwise they're going to get nowhere with Brad Scott at the helm. For the Swans Adelaide game, I said that the Swans are still favourites. I am betting for them to win the premiership. I think they can basically do a Boston Celtics of the NBA this season, where you start really strong, you go through a little bit of a slump where you can still get some wins, but you do play some pretty poor form, and then you really turn it on late. And I think that the Swans, without Heaney, without Papley, without McInerney, without one more, I can't remember who exactly, McCartan, that was the other one, against the Crows, they were still able to get a good win. And I think they are primed to have a huge September. They're playing the Giants, and both teams, I believe, should be fully healthy, and it'll be a fantastic battle. And somehow, that was the game that put it 4:35 on a Saturday afternoon. Bit questionable, given it was first versus fourth, and also a derby. But I think that the Swans are primed, and I still think they're favourites, even with their slight dip in form. For the Crows, they need to buy whether that's Cosy Pickett moving to you guys, Jack Lukosius, going for an Oliver or Petty. I believe stay away from Petty at all costs. They just need to do something because Tex isn't getting any older. Does a forward line of Thilthorpe, Lukosius, and Fogarty lead you to a flag? There's a midfield of Rankin, Dawson, and possibly Laird, Crouch, and maybe Oliver lead you to a premiership. There's questions, and a lot of it is due to their list because, yes, they had a really tough draw this year, but there was a lot that was still wrong that should have been performing not to standard that they showed that they could last year. For the Sunday games, start with the Dogs and the Giants, and I think for the Dogs, their talent is now at a level where it's just so difficult to match. Look at their midfield. English, still a good ruckman, hasn't been as good as he was last year. It's still very, very solid. You've got Bont, obviously one of the best players in the game. Adam Trelaw's had a fantastic season. Libba, obviously we know how good he is. And now you add Ed Richards into that. You've got Riley Sanders in the twos. You've got Harley Gallagher who you can play in there. You've got Garcia. There's a lot of players who you can chuck in as extras. But you've got such a good core that it doesn't matter who you chuck in because they're going to win the clearance. And then you look behind the ball. Liam Jones, fantastic. Was able to play, which I'm not too sure about, but I haven't really watched the footage of the tackle. I think it's fine from the little I've heard, but I might discuss that later in a video. If you want to stay tuned, please subscribe so you can get notifications. But I just think that if you look at their backline, it now seems settled. You've got Karmas and O'Donnell switching as that third defender, and then Rory Lubb sort of taking that more athletic forward, and I think that works. And then up forward, they've got some really dangerous players, and Ugle-Hagan, Norton, and Darcy could very well individually take a final away from any team. And it'll be interesting to see how they go against Hawthorn this week, because do you want to stop Josh Weddle? Do you want to stop James Sicily? I think it's a choice, and I'd preferably go Sicily, but there's a lot of growth in Scrimshaw, there's a lot of growth in Weddle from the last couple of seasons, and it's a tough choice, that's for sure. And then for the Giants, I've gone, the Giants need their smalls, which is pretty ironic. They missed both Bedford and Daniels a lot on the weekend, and Brent Daniels officially re-signed till 2031, which is a huge contract extension. Congratulations to him, absolutely. But it's a big deal, and to be honest, his performance has resulted in a good value for money, honestly. He has been fantastic in the back end of this season and really been a difference maker for the Giants in a down year for Toby Green. Hogan's been fantastic up forward. Cadman's been a bit better as of late. But outside of that, there's still not a lot there, and they really do rely on their small forwards to be impact players. Tom Green's been back much better in recent weeks. Lockie Whitfield's had a fantastic year, but they still rely on their smalls. And so I just like the symmetry in that being the Giants rely on their smalls. For the Carlton St Kilda game, I've said that the Saints have shown their blueprint for what they want to build off of next year, where just because it's not a game on your terms doesn't mean you can't win. And it's another close game that they're involved in this year, and they finally won a close game. They've won a couple, but they were so horrible in the first half of the year in close games. Any of those games, I believe you could have had the Port game, the Giants game, Essendon game. I'm pretty sure they're in the top 8, pushing for top 6. That's a big difference, and it shows that there's a lot of room for improvement for next year, and that's really good. It's just, do they allow Battle to leave, and do they want to use those 2 picks that they might get if he does leave on midfielders, because they still need a lot of midfield help. For Carlton, I've said that they're still close, and that's because you got Patrick Cripps at the helm. Sam Walsh was much better on the weekend. Nick Newman's a fantastic player. How many changes will they come in for the final will be very interesting, because I've heard potentially 8. Doherty might be back in as well, which for his technically second game of the season would be a real boost, because I think he's a fantastic player and he just provides something that they don't have, which is just a really solid player who's fantastic with the ball. And look at Sard, he's a very good off half back, same as Newman, but they don't really get up the ground and allow delivery inside 50. Doherty can, and he's a really good kick, which helps when you have 2 key forwards. I just think that if Carlton get all their players back, watch out Brisbane, because it could very well be an upset. But that's all I'll say for that game. And the final game was between Fremantle and Port Adelaide. I said Freo need a harsh review. And the reason I said that is because they were third 4 or 5 weeks ago, and they're now out of the 8. They finished 10th, I think, which is really, really poor. All they needed to do was win when you're at home. Yes, no Pierce, no Darcy, no Tracy, but I still think they had the chance to win, and they didn't. Their midfield was primed to be able to go up against a midfield just as talented as them, yet they still couldn't capitalise on it. Sarong didn't have a fantastic game. He was really well held by Drew. It's just, where do you want to go? You've moved Hayden Young into the midfield, but that's left your back half a lot with some really stagnant ball movement. You're relying so much on Jordan Clark to use his pace to be able to break lines, but you've got no one else to do it if he's getting stopped. And that's why I was so hesitant to move Hayden Young into the midfield. Not because I didn't believe he was going to be a midfielder, but because I thought he brought so much to be a defender. And I didn't really describe it that well when I said that, but I think that's been proven now because there's just nothing else. They like to intercept the ball and control the ball, but when they don't have it, they get scored against very easily. And so whether that's ensuring up their backline or whether that's trusting their forwards and midfielders more, I'm not sure. But it all honestly depends on Justin Longmuir, and he might get fired as well. It's just going to be a very interesting off-season for Fremantle. And then for Port Adelaide, are they going to still be able to win a game in the finals without Houston and without Farrell? They like to move the ball quickly, and those are your two prime movers. Houston obviously had the suspension, and Farrell just had a season-ending hamstring injury. They moved Burn Jones back there, as he was a half-back flanker in the 2020 season and made the All-Australian team. But is it enough? Can you find someone else to do it? Do you bring in, I think his name's Sins from the 21 draft. I think they took him pick 8. I can't remember his first name. I think it might be Josh Sin. Do they bring him in, who they've played off halfback in a few games? Maybe move Boak there and use him as like a Dane Sorko? I'm not sure, but if they don't fix it, they won't win the flag, or might not even win a final. I'm pretty sure you could hear me losing my voice. Got to start doing some vocal warm-ups. But yeah, that's sort of what I think for each team. It's certainly an interesting round 24. It's going to be a very good final series, but there's hopefully going to be a lot of movement in the off-season. I think we're primed for it. I think there's a few teams who could look to trade in a lot of pieces, and a couple teams who could trade out a lot of pieces. But that is going to be the end of this video. I really appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. If you wouldn't mind leaving your thoughts in the comments below as well, as I think there was a lot of talking points. Leave a like on the video as well if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to my channel if you do like this type of content. There's going to be a lot more coming, both in the finals period and in the off-season. But as always, I really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you all next time.